10 Riddles of History Elucidated in the Last Decades. Secrets attract us all. We love to read and watch shows about them and try to solve these riddles ourselves. Even if history will never reveal all its secrets, at least we have managed to fill in some gaps in our collective ignorance. The 10 enigmas of history presented in this article were elucidated relatively recently. Here's what this is about. Riddles of History: The Death of Male Mammoths. Here is the first piece of information on our list of history riddles. In 2017, scientists found the explanation for an oddity they had noticed in mammoth remains discovered over time. 70% of woolly mammoth fossils came from males. Given that the proportion of the sexes was roughly equal in mammoth populations, scientists have wondered why only the remains of males have been preserved to this day. This is due to the structure of mammoth society, scientists have found. Like modern elephants, their woolly counterparts lived in matriarchal groups, led by an older female. These groups were mainly composed of females and their young. When they reached adulthood, the males were kicked out of the group and ended up living alone or in bachelor groups. Lacking the support of the herd and the experience of the leading female, these males took a lot of risks and often met their end. But, paradoxically, this very fact contributed to the preservation of mammoth remains. Lone males often died in swamps and crevasses, so their remains were buried and protected from the elements. The same did not happen with the remains of other Ice Age animals, including the remains of female mammoths. The missing Swiss couple. On a summer day in 1942, Marcelin Dumoulin and his wife, Francine, walked out into a meadow near the Swiss town of Chandelin. They intended to feed the cows and milk them. It was the last time they were seen alive. The Dumoulins disappeared on August 15, 1942, and were only found in July 2017. Their frozen bodies were discovered on a melting glacier. The ice had preserved their remains, and the two's personal belongings were found intact. DNA tests carried out later confirmed that they were the bodies of Marcelin and Francine Dumoulin. It seems that they fell into a crevasse, where their bodies remained for decades. When the Saint Florent Glacier began to melt, the bodies came to light. According to the Swiss authorities, this case is not unique. Melting glaciers regularly reveal the frozen remains of people who disappeared years or even decades ago. Finding the USS Indianapolis. In 1945, the sinking of the USS Indianapolis resulted in the largest single-ship loss of life in U.S. Navy history. The ship was on a secret mission. It had transported parts for the baby atomic bomb to the American Air Base at Tinian. After that, the sailors conducted training missions. While sailing to the Philippines, the ship was torpedoed by a Japanese submarine. Of the crew of 1196 men, only 316 survived. The vessel sank 12 minutes after sending an SOS signal. It ended up on the bottom of the ocean, somewhere between Guam and the Philippines. In the last 2 decades, 2 expeditions, equipped with modern technology, set out in search of the vessel, but without success. In 2016, new clues emerged that suggested the USS Indianapolis had passed another vessel 11 hours before it sank. Using information on the other ship's route, a new expedition, funded by Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen, has estimated the location of the long-sought vessel. After more than a year, the USS Indianapolis was finally found in the North Pacific Ocean at a depth of 5,500 meters. Riddles of History: Painting the Terracotta Army. Researchers in China believe they have solved the 2,200-year-old mystery of the polychrome paint applied to soldiers in the famous Terracotta Army. Discovered in 1974, the Terracotta Army is a vast collection of almost 9,000 statues representing soldiers, chariots, and horses. The artifacts were buried with China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, and served as his imperial guard in the afterlife. When found, some statues still bore traces of colored pigments. In addition, there were also the remains of a paint binder on the statues, which is very rare, especially in the case of remains buried for a long time in water-saturated soil. The pigments have been identified as inorganic compounds such as vermilion, azurite, and malachite, but the exact binder and method used to paint the Terracotta army remained a mystery until recently. To find out the answer, the Chinese used a cutting-edge technique called laser-assisted spectrometry. They obtained accurate results for the fixative and then compared the result to artificially aged samples of some adhesives. Thus, the proteins in each sample were identified. According to the study, artists during the ancient Qing dynasty dressed the statues with a layer or two of lacquer obtained from the toxicodendron plant, also known as the lac tree. They then applied the polychrome layers directly or, in most cases, used a bonding agent derived from animal blue. Blood falls from Antarctica. In 1911, geographer Thomas Griffith Taylor came across a strange stream of water flowing on the Taylor Glacier in Antarctica. The watercourse was called blood falls because of its reddish color. The phenomenon has intrigued scientists for more than a century. Initially, it was thought that the pigment was due to the presence of red algae, but this theory was disproved. Ultimately, the researchers concluded that the water is colored red due to iron oxides. Another aspect that intrigued the experts was the existence of flowing water on a glacier where the temperatures are very low. Finally, in 2017, they obtained details about the bizarre phenomenon. Using state-of-the-art technology, scientists from Colorado College and the University of Alaska Fairbanks discovered that this waterfall was connected to a large source of salt water located beneath the Taylor Glacier. Due to the high concentration of salts, the 91-meter-deep salt marsh has lasted for more than 1 million years. This stunned experts, who thought the existence of water was impossible given the very low temperature of the glacier. In fact, Taylor Glacier is now the coldest glacier that contains flowing water. Why did the largest primate disappear? Scientists generally agree that Gigantopithecus was the largest primate to have ever lived on Earth. But the fossils we have do not give us a clear picture of its size. Experts say he was between 1.8 and 3 meters tall and weighed between 200 and 500 kilograms. It is not known when Gigantopithecus lived, but it is thought to have roamed the Earth from 9 million years ago to 100,000 years ago. Despite the uncertainty, researchers at the Senckenberg Center for Human Evolution in Germany believe they have solved a mystery about this primate. It's about why Gigantopithecus went extinct. According to scientists, the primate disappeared due to the inability to adapt. After studying the teeth of the fossils, scientists came to the conclusion that the primate was exclusively vegetarian and lived in forests. During the Pleistocene, large forested areas in China and Thailand, where the primate lived, turned into savannas. The primate's food source disappeared, and the animal disappeared before it could adapt to a new diet. Riddles of History's Flight of Barry Troy. On February 25, 1958, Lieutenant William Thomas Barry Troy, of the Royal Canadian Navy, was flying an F-2H Banshee to the airfield in Mayport, Florida. The 29-year-old pilot broke out of the formation of 4 planes and was never seen again. Although he was presumed dead, only his helmet and a plane wheel were recovered. Troy's disappearance has remained a mystery to this day, but in 2017 Hurricane Irma revealed a new clue. After the hurricane hit the east coast of the U.S., an employee of Hanna Park in Florida saw a pile of debris washed ashore. Among the remains, the man found a parachute on the harness of which had been inscribed the words Lieutenant Troy. The parachute must have been buried under the sand dunes and blown to the surface by strong winds. Apparently, the parachute didn't open. No human remains or pieces of the plane have been found, so it is still unclear if Troy's plane crashed in that area. Tibetan Millet. A study by Washington State University scientists attempted to provide an answer for the massive population exodus from the edges of the Tibetan Plateau about 4,000 years ago. According to the team led by archaeologist Jade Dalpoin-Gages, people were forced to leave the mountainous area of eastern Tibet due to climate change. Archaeological evidence shows that millet was the main source of food for the people of those lands. But at the end of the warm period known as the Holocene climatic optimum, global temperatures dropped dramatically and made it impossible to grow millet. In the absence of food, people had to leave their territories. The region only began to recover after 300 years, thanks to the introduction of wheat and barley. They resisted the cold weather much better, so they immediately became the favorite crops. Riddles of History: The Bizarre Disappearance of the Tasmanian Tiger. The last Tasmanian tiger died in captivity in 1936 and was officially declared extinct 50 years later. Although this animal no longer exists, researchers believe they have solved a mystery surrounding it, why it survived on the island of Tasmania after disappearing from the Australian mainland for thousands of years. According to this hypothesis, the Tasmanian tiger disappeared due to an epidemic. Another theory says that it disappeared due to competition with the dingo dog, an animal introduced by European settlers that went wild on the island. However, researchers from the University of Adelaide say that climate change, specifically the drought caused in Australia by the El Niño phenomenon, was to blame for the disappearance of this creature. This drought led to the extinction of tigers from the continent. Tasmanian specimens were more fortunate and managed to survive due to the greater amount of rainfall on the island. Solving the oldest unsolved crime in North America. In 1607, Jamestown, Virginia, became the first permanent English settlement in America. In recent decades, the settlement has also been a point of interest for archaeologists interested in colonial America. In 1996, archaeologists excavating the ruins of Fort James discovered the skeleton of an unknown young man, which was labeled JR-102C. The man had been shot in the right leg and the lead bullet was found with the remains. His death, which had occurred 400 years ago, became an unsolved crime. Almost all crimes with such a long history remain unsolved. But in 2013, forensic archaeologists announced that they had identified both the victim and the killer. From the bullet marks on the bones, scientists deduced that JR-102C was shot in a duel. Based on the documents and other information, experts concluded that JR-102C's name was George Harrison and that he had been killed by a businessman named Richard Stevens. The two dueled in 1624. The merchant shot Harrison in the leg, and Harrison bled to death.